Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Baby Talk Tuesday. I'm Car Wright. A lot of you know that, and hopefully, there's new people that are finding out about Baby Talk. And so, you may not know me. I have been facilitating all things babies, birth, pregnancy for oh my gosh, probably going on over 20 to 23 years. I have facilitated it in all different types of ways, from prenatal yoga to birth preparation to being a doula to being a facilitator and facilitating energy around people's points of view. And now I just talk to babies and talk to moms and to be moms about what is possible for them and them being able to talk to babies, because I know that I'm not the only one of my kind. And that is one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about today. And if you are seeing this on my main page and you know anyone who may benefit from this information, either someone who is trying to currently conceive, someone who's already pregnant, someone who works with pregnant women, um, someone who is working with women who are trying to conceive, like what anyone who's basically a pregnancy or birth care provider, um, you can invite them. I have a group on Facebook called Baby Talk with Car Right, and you can go pop on over and ask to join, and we'll add you. And all of my Baby Talk Tuesdays are in there, and you can watch to your heart's delight. So for today, what I wanted to do is like literally talk about the roots. So how does your baby talk to you? Um, when it's such an interesting question, because it's like we're always communicating with each other all the time, right? Like even if you're not verbally communicating with someone in your life, like how many things you're actually communicating with on a daily basis that you're not acknowledging or paying attention that you are communicating with them. We have such a very interesting and quite limited idea of what talking is in this culture, right? In most cultures, there are some cultures that have not lost um, what they know about around communication and what you're able to communicate with and what you're not. And so the whole idea of how does your baby talk to you is kind of a funny way of saying it. It's more like starting to be aware that they communicate with you is really, really the first step. And so one of the main things that stops people from communicating with their babies, whether prior to conception, during pregnancy, even post um, birth, when most people are like, well, my baby doesn't talk in words, so we don't communicate. But I like, how many moms like, is that really true? It Are you just communicating all the time in a myriad of different ways? Um, we're just not taught in this culture at all. In most cultures, we're not taught to that we communicate with each other all the time. The words are very secondary. And if I say that, like, it's so funny because we all know that, but not very many people are willing to admit it or actually willing to talk about it. So whatever, I'm going to talk about it. And like for me, I didn't realize that I was consistently having communication with the babies that were coming to my classes in their moms' bellies. And oftentimes, like I would have moms be in prenatal yoga, and then they would come to postnatal yoga with mom and baby. And then they would start to show up, and there would be this other energy there. And then pretty soon I would get a call, and she'd be like, well, I'm coming back to prenatal yoga. And I'm like, I knew that. Like, literally, I knew that. And how did I know that? I knew that because the being, that baby, was having a conversation with me. Was it like a cognitive conversation? No. But were they announcing their presence? Absolutely. And that's a lot of times what babies will do. You will just have a sense. You won't know why you have the sense or where the sense came from. Most women probably don't even tell people that they're having that sense, because most people would think you're crazy. I wouldn't think you're crazy. There may have been a point in my life where I would have been like, really? But now I know, like, I've just had way too many way too many experiences with babies to not know that I know that they are communicating all the time. So it's not necessarily how does your baby communicate with you? It's more that they communicate, and would you be willing to acknowledge that that's what it is? Because a lot of people will dismiss those things. They'll have thoughts in their head that are that communication channel that the baby is choosing, and they'll dismiss it as that's crazy, or I don't, I'm tired, or I'm emotional, or whatever. However, it's so interesting the myriad of ways in which we dismiss what we're actually aware of. And we dismiss it for what reason? We dismiss it because we're not told it's possible. And in fact, oftentimes people are ridiculed or made fun of, or if you're a little kid and you have an imaginary like friend, like what actually is that like your awareness of an energy? Is it like a ghost? Maybe. Is it an energy that you're aware of that you have the ability to communicate? Because the other thing that's very strange that I like to start to get people to ponder, and really a lot of the stuff I talk on baby talk, a lot of stuff I talk about on baby talk, you may uh, immediately think, no, no way. And like, I get that because I was like, I am a skeptic. Like, as much as that is a funny thing to say about me, I am like, I always have approached things with more skepticism and caution than just like, oh, of course, you know. But this particular thing, it's like I have had, like I said, I've had way too many um experiences where communication was absolutely occurring, and there was an actual result based on the communication. And so it's like the thing that for me started to change my ability to be more present with that, to hear more and to communicate more, was getting out of the point of view that it wasn't happening. And just because I had never been taught that it could happen, or that I could be aware of, um, things that aren't like in bodies, or I could have a conversation or communicate with a tree or an animal or a plant. Like, these are all things that some of us have grown up on that, but the large majority of us, no, we haven't. Like, that isn't something that people talk about or people perpetrate, and oftentimes you are made wrong for it. So, like, what I would say is like, the first thing if you want to have this experience of either being able to communicate with your baby in utero during the birth process, before they're verbal, once they're born, the first thing you have to start with is like the idea that it can't be done. So, everywhere you've decided that it can't be done, what if you were to change your perspective and be like, okay, so I'm just going to play with it today. Like, what if I actually can have this conversation or communication with my baby? So, where do you start? Like, if you're pregnant, where do you start? Like, maybe you start asking them, like, hey, what would you like to eat? Like, what things would make you happy right now? And start to be willing to hear the answer to that. Because when you have food, when you're pregnant, you're not just eating for one, you're eating for two. And a lot of times people use that as like a derogatory thing, like, oh, I'm eating for two now. And so a lot of women will look at that and feel weird and judgmental about their choices of food. And what I would say is like, I wonder if you are feeling weird about what you're craving, if you are feeling weird about the food that you're choosing to eat while you're pregnant, that it's not something that you would normally choose, or blah, blah, blah. What if you started to be in the question of, wait a second, is this actually what my baby is asking for? Am I actually listening and talking to my baby, and I've just not acknowledged it? This happens so often. And I've talked about it from the space of like, a lot of times women who in their life, non-pregnant life, don't eat meat. And then they become pregnant, and it's like they can't stop craving meat, they can't stop eating meat. And there's a lot of women that will just be like, well, it's because I require the extra, protein or iron or whatever. And all of those things, yes, your body does require different things when you're pregnant. And I think I've done one or two baby talks on that. And I will probably do a lot more in the future because the body is a whole different organism that you can have conversations with that's separate from the baby, that's separate from you. Like all three of you are working together to create this thing that we call having babies. Um, and so, sometimes people will chalk it up to that, but I just invite you, like, what if you played with going, okay, wait a second. I may not like meat, but is my baby a carnivore? Does my baby actually desire to have meat? And is that why I have been eating it? Like, what if you're actually far greater than you've ever considered? And what if you are already communicating with your baby and actually including them in the process and actually meeting their needs before they even get here? Like, how freaking amazing is that? There's so many moms out there that think that they're shit at doing that, like being a good mom. And I think 99.9% of them aren't even acknowledging the amazing stuff they're doing without even realize they're doing it, or they're chalking it up to like it's a craving. Okay, maybe. And what else is it? What else could it be if it wasn't just a craving? And that is really an example I get a lot of times because I think it's a really easy, accessible example. And it's something that you can start to play with without having a lot of significance on it. Because there's pretty much everything that is involved with pregnancy, with birth, with postpartum. I mean, you all know, if you've been pregnant for a second, there's a 1,000,001 different ways to approach every single one of those elements. And there's a lot of points of view about the right way, the wrong ways, the shoulds, the shouldn'ts. There's a bazillion different kinds of books. There's all of a sudden you just get inundated with all of these, like this, that, the other thing. And then you get everybody's advice because everybody loves to give a pregnant woman free advice. Like, that there's no truer statement on the planet. And I still to this day haven't figured that one out. Like, the amount of times that I would have my moms come into yoga and be like, oh my God, I was stuck in an elevator with this old man and he was just giving me all this unsolicited advice. Why it's older gentlemen, I don't know. But it's a thing. So if you've been accosted by an older man telling you what you should and shouldn't do during pregnancy and birth, you're in the majority, not the minority. And I have no idea. I have no idea where that comes from. So if that gives you a giggle in the moment, there you go. So yeah, it's like there's so many different, like, it's just this like input of an influx of information, and like what you would like to choose often becomes this mishmash of everything you're being told, projected at. A lot of women just kind of like shut down and are like, whatever, I'm just going to do what my doctor tells me because it's so intense. I can't, like, I can't deal with like all this other stuff. Just going to do what they tell me to do. And what I would say is, like, whatever you're choosing and whatever path you're on, like, what if you could include your baby? And just even in the simplest, like smallest of senses, consider that it is possible that they can communicate with you. They can communicate with you through body sensations, cravings, for example. They can communicate with you. A lot of times you'll have thoughts, your thoughts in your head that you think are your thoughts but aren't. You'll have imagery. A lot of babies communicate based on imagery. You'll just have like a sensation, like a pull towards something. That can also be like, like I said, there's a myriad of ways on how they talk to you. The more open you are to the idea that they talk to you, that's really where the actual like choice and like of it is if you are willing to actually acknowledge that it's a possibility and start to play with the idea that it's a possibility and start to be curious about what your baby is saying, because it's like anything. If you have a person that you've been having a conversation with and they're not paying attention to you or don't hear you, eventually you just what? You just stop. You stop talking. So even if it's just for you, just for fun, and I should say just for you and your baby, you don't have to tell anyone you're even doing it. You could just take a moment, sit down, be present with your baby. This is before you conceive, after conception, during pregnancy, during birth, postpartum, when your baby's in the body, but still like mostly baby. Like, what if you were just willing to be in the energy of like, okay, so I'm so, I'm sorry that I haven't been willing to know that you are actually communicating with you. I would like to see what's possible for both of us. What do you got? And just see what shows up. When you invite your baby to talk to you and you are willing, whether anyone else knows about it or not, to hear your baby, things can show up. So, next week, we're going to actually talk about ways in which you can communicate. So, two-way path. And thank you for joining me today on Baby Talk Tuesday, and we'll see you next week. If you have any questions, if you have any topics you'd like me to talk about, you can join Baby Talk with Cara Wright, the group, and put them in there, and I will address them either on the next Baby Talk or some Baby Talk in the future. So thank you again for joining. Make it a great Tuesday.